Hi, I'm Ben,
And I'm Josh.
and this is the Bad at Magic podcast, a podcast about games, life, and other things. And welcome to episode 56.
Ben, what do you know about your sense of smell?
Um, I know that it's highly associated with memory, and that it works mechanically differently than dogs, who are way better at it than us.
So, from the extensive research I did in 10 minutes on Wikipedia, you smell through the use of olfactory receptors, which are little things that are in, for us, our nose and our mouth, that react differently to chemical compounds. Now, different olfactory sensors receive a different range of compounds and then react
Right?
differently to each one. And the unique combination of how all of these different olfactory receptors interact with various compounds gives us our ability to identify unique smells.
And whatever COVID-19 does shuts that whole system down.
I don't want to talk about
I
mucous
know from
membranes.
firsthand experience.
I keep forgetting you had COVID. God,
Yeah.
just, so irresponsible. Anyway, scientists, or biologists, I should say, have broken down the different types of olfactory receptors into 56 families of olfactory
There's our
receptors.
number.
There it is. And apparently humans only have like 15 of them or
Okay,
something like
that's
that.
wow. Still, I mean, we look at everything with our eyes and we see all the colors with three different kinds of receptors. So to have 15 means our sense of smell is very multifaceted.
I get that, but how does that begs the question, is the electromagnetic spectrum easier to observe than the chemical spectrum or all the different organic compounds that can be created with the combinations? Because like light can only break down into so many colors, but there's like a plethora of chemicals that exist and a bunch of ways to combine those.
I feel like there's a lot of nuance to smells. I'll smell something I haven't smelled in 40 years and I'll instantly remember it and it'll take me back to somewhere.
I think that ties into the whole memory thing that you're talking about because
Yeah.
smells are an inherently they live in a different part of our brain. Because how many times throughout the day do you like make a mental note of the smell that you're smelling? Like, oh, that smells like this. But you're seeing things all the time. You're constantly observing light and you're making note of it because presumably you're interacting with the world around you. So maybe that's where it comes in with the memory.
One interesting one here in Shreveport is that there must be a paper mill in the area somewhere. Because growing up, my cousins lived near a paper mill. It has this very distinctive sour smell, but it's only when the wind comes from a certain direction that you can smell it.
Hmm. Sometimes I drive by dairy farms and I smell the hardcore manure coming from all the cows,
Yeah.
it takes me right back to my time in Clovis, New Mexico, where the entire town smelled like that all the time.
Yeah. Good. Now we're all remembering our favorite smells. What are some of your favorite smells, listeners? What takes you back to your childhood?
If Bad at Magic had a smell, what would it be?
Ooh, that's a good one. It would be a brand new Nike Air Max 95.
You see, I associate my beer that I'm drinking right now
Ah.
with our podcast because I'm always drinking beer on the podcast. Which uh, life hack, listeners, or a little actually no, glimpse behind the scenes. If I get funnier or more interesting throughout the podcast, that is because I am drinking beer the entire time in every episode.
I don't think you've ever mentioned that, so that's a new interesting fact. I'm smelling some unopened magic cards here. I wonder if that can be the smell of the podcast.
Oh, that's a good smell. It
All right,
smells like wasted money.
do you have anything else about olfactory senses before we move on?
I don't. It's episode 56. Welcome, everybody.
So last time, one of our listeners pointed out to me that you gave this. I don't know what happens to us after we die. I think we just go blank. But if we lived on, I would like this idea, and you described your idea. And the listener said to me, "That's the Borg. Josh wants to be the Borg."
Oh, man. If we're going to bring that into play, yeah, like sign me up. If the Borg showed up, I'd be in line to be like, man, assimilate this guy over here. I want to be part of the hive mind. Let's get some stuff done.
Resistance is futile.
Yeah, I'd be Captain Picard coming back on the Borg side, like, listen, guys, it's way better over here.
So that's almost the same idea that was portrayed on the Matrix franchise with what's his name that wanted to get back into the Matrix after he'd gotten out. He's like, it
Oh,
sucks
yeah.
out there. I want back in.
Well, I mean, you think about it, like he's living like a normal modern day life in the Matrix, and then he gets woken up and freed from the system to live in a dystopian nightmare future. I mean, you can't blame the guy.
Yeah. Except for the fact that he had to like betray all of his closest friends, and he just, I mean, from a utilitarian point of view, if you could betray everyone, get everything you wanted, and then not remember it at all, so you had zero guilt associated with it, it's like the ultimate utility.
At the same time, like, in this universe, if this like if the Matrix actually existed, you would think he wouldn't be the only one. That can't possibly be the first uh, uh, defector that the Zionists have ever had. I feel like there is a unit for him. There's like a deep cover Matrix unit where there's like 5 or 6 guys that are plugged in all the time and just like doing reconnaissance or working it from the inside or something.
Hmm. Yeah, and to the machines, I mean, just the fact that he's shown himself to be an unreliable battery, it doesn't seem like there's really anything in it for them. Just convince him so he'll betray them and then kill him.
This is the classic espionage problem with double agents. If you flip over to the other side can't trust you by default. You've already flipped once.
Yeah, I think that works with relationships too.
Oh, it just got real.
Yeah. Okay, so last time you could not, for the life of you, think of the word net neutrality.
It bothered me so much that
I couldn't either.
immediately
We should have just stopped and looked it up.
I looked it up after the podcast, like the first thing, because it was
And you
bothering
smacked
me.
your forehead. You're like, net neutrality.
Like we said, it was a huge buzzword, and it was a thing very close to my heart.
Okay, so I had mentioned before on the podcast that actor Chris, oh boy, what can I think of his name, that plays Captain America?
No, not Chris Hemsworth. Chris Evans.
Chris Evans.
The
Actor
other
Chris
Chris.
Evans, as kind of a personal project, has founded a website called A Starting Point. What the gap he was trying to fill that he found in cyberspace and in the public discussion was a neutral place where you could go and look for information regarding hot button political ideas and get both points of view without a bias from the get-go.
You have mentioned that, but I forgot it existed until you reminded me. That seems like an excellent place to go for something like this.
Yes, so I went to this website and looked up net neutrality, and there was 3 messages from Republican senators and representatives, and like 5 or 6 messages from Democratic senators, and I kind of wrote it down, like, what's the deal about net neutrality? And I realized, it's not just a technological idea; it's very much a political idea.
It's very much about how this infrastructure is to be used going forward by the people that own it and maintain it versus the people that use it every day.
Yeah, so let's give kind of the bottom line of what it supposedly is. And it felt like there was agreement on both sides of the aisle about what the baseline definition is. And that is, as the internet is increasing in prominence of utility and ubiquity and necessity in the public arena, that it's kind of in a weird way encroaching into space of other things that we have way more governance over. For instance, like airspace. We have in America and around the globe, we have the Federal Aviation Administration and other equivalent groups around the world that govern airspace because it's become a public resource. And if it isn't managed, it'll just be chaos and people could die.
Right. But at the same time, while this is a public resource, there are private ventures that are trying to utilize it to make money. And so they're always going to try to, some players and some actors are going to try to abuse that fact. When I think about net neutrality, I think about what brought this really to the forefront in my mind was the problem Netflix was having with their internet service provider. Is because when Netflix was just a DVD rental service, it wasn't that big a deal, but they were still paying for I want you to give me this much bandwidth into my system. And then they turned into the streaming service, and that requirement kept increasing and increasing and increasing. And Netflix had this argument, got in this fight with their ISP, where the ISP is like, hey, we need to be seeing some of these profits that you're making off of our service. And Netflix is like, you're already making the money you're supposed to be making. You provide us the bandwidth we require that we pay you for. But the ISP was mad that they're not seeing a percentage of Netflix's bottom line. They're just maintaining the cables going into the building.
Yeah. And I love how much innovation that capitalism introduces in situations like this because Netflix ultimately grew beyond even what they could lease from a single ISP. And they couldn't just solve it by having multiples and distributed data centers. They actually did some really cool things that allow them to technologically distribute streaming in a way that doesn't consume as much bandwidth and is way more distributed across the internet. I'll see if I can find a video about it. It's really cool, but it's not just some server sitting somewhere and them sucking up all the bandwidth of the internet because everybody's watching whatever on Netflix.
Right. Well, but the argument that happened with net neutrality was, does the ISP, the people that physically own the cables that are running from point A to point B to deliver this internet bandwidth,
The routers and the fiber optics.
all the infrastructure, do they have the right to determine how the traffic or what traffic gets to go on their network, and what level of control do they have over it? Do they just offer the pipe going into your house and they don't care what goes through the pipe, or do they get a say on what does and does not get to go through and at what speeds?
Yeah. Yeah, okay. I agree that that's pretty much the baseline problem. So then there's the other thing I was saying, that as this becomes something that isn't just a curiosity off on the periphery of everyday life while we go on about our lives, it's becoming the place where we shop, the place where our identities exist, the place where we communicate, the place where a lot of essential things for everyday life have started to happen. Now the government has an interest in getting involved.
If the internet goes out at your house, which it hasn't in mine for a while, knock on wood, jeez. But what do you do? Like, I don't have TV. All my TV streaming is gone. All my music is gone. My access to information in general. Like, what am I going to do? Like, interact with my family? Talk to other humans? That's not a thing.
Yeah, I've talked about this before about how we're still in what I think is the area where we're transitioning to this becoming the backbone of everyday life. I think we talked about it in the context of Ready Player One. How at some point in the future it became the place where they go to school and, go to their jobs in virtual space. We haven't reached that point yet.
It's close. I'm teleworking more than 50% of the time right now.
But the infrastructure, your company hasn't stopped leasing physical office space yet.
True, we have not. Like, it's still only 50%, but that's more than it was 2 years ago.
If the internet went out today, it wouldn't be, what do we do? It'd be, you just get in the car and go to the office.
Which would be annoying.
But it's coming. The time's coming when that could be it. And this future we imagine of giant cities may never happen because we'll all be able to get together without leaving our homes.
Which then this leads to the bigger argument of net neutrality. Like, this is one of the arguments we have to have in that progression of evolution of...
Yep. It becomes more and more important, and everyone wants a say, and the internet service providers want to make more money off it being more important.
Right. And so like you said, there are governing bodies that govern airspace. And so how much government intervention do we need in the cyberspace in order to make sure that everybody's playing fair?
Yeah. So I listened to all the messages by the Democrats and all the messages by the Republicans, and I'll put a link in the show notes if you want to go check this out yourself. They're short. They're like 1 minute each for each of these people. This website's really good for this. So they're like, let me tell you about net neutrality. The Democrats repeatedly mentioned three main ideas. The idea of people who oppose net neutrality are big corporations and small businesses won't be able to compete in this space. The second idea was the idea of freedom equated as equality. Free access to the internet is about equality, and they wanted you to think in your mind of like discrimination, that not having net neutrality is discrimination, and it will allow unfair things to happen.
Yes, if you can't pay for the higher tiered service, then you literally don't have access to things that are behind a paywall. Is that fair?
Right. I'm still just trying to present the ideas. And then the third one that Democrats were saying was this idea of, we're the government and we're here to help. Like, we will protect you, the little businesses and the people who are being discriminated against from big bad companies who want to charge you for things that you need to live your life. That was the Democrat messages. Then the Republican messages were we're America and we own things. You talk about this a lot on this podcast, Josh. Like, can't anyone own anything anymore? Well, the ISPs own the routers and they own the fiber optics. They paid for them, they install them, they upgrade them, they replace them, they maintain them. They own that stuff. Do they or don't they own that stuff? That's one idea. Don't counteract them yet. That's okay. One idea. Another is the idea of competition, that competition will sort this all out. And that's their version of freedom. So the Democrats' version of freedom was equality, and the Republicans' version of freedom is competition.
Okay.
And then the third idea the Republicans were talking about is that federal regulation leads to monopoly, and they gave some historical examples. So those are all the ideas.
All right. So where do you land on this whole conversation, Ben?
I like some out of each, but I tend to lean towards the first two ideas of the Republicans that companies should be free to own their own stuff, and that competition will sort it out.
Oh man, you stumbled into a landmine on that one because competition doesn't sort it out. Competition actively makes it worse because that's what's leading to monopoly, not federal regulation. For example, ever heard of Google Fiber?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't know the current status of it.
it died. And do you know why Google Fiber died, Ben?
No.
Because the companies that owned high-speed internet infrastructure in the cities that Google was trying to get into tied them up in so much litigation over the free access and use of like trenches and just being in the same like public pipeline to put their lines in that Google gave up on it. Like it is not a thing. We can't get this pushed through all the litigation that all of the other ISPs are putting us through. So screw it. We're not doing it. Like that is a barrier to entry that is caused by large companies just trying to prevent competition from popping up. And if Google can't do it, how am I like Joe Schmo gonna start up a small time ISP if freaking Google couldn't get through the other ISPs?
So I know that the federal government has enacted a lot of laws with, say, a parallel but different system, the cellular system, that have allowed other companies to compete. Basically, we can use your infrastructure and we'll lease it on behalf of our customers, and then we'll reach a deal with you. And then you can have multiple providers competing for giving access to users on the same system, basically. And I don't know if that would be able to exist without federal protections. I'm not saying there's no place for that.
Well, and what you're talking about there with the cell phone structure, that is slightly different because we're talking about the cellular bandwidth, the actual like the actual electromagnetic radiation that's going through the air is limited and is controlled and given out and parceled by the FCC.
Right. Yeah. So yes, there's the electromagnetic spectrum aspect of it, but then there's also the infrastructure. Like in order to give service to this geographic area, you need a tower of this height broadcasting this amount, and it takes energy and antennas and network connections.
Well, I get what you're saying, but even if a company that had the resources, the fiscal resources to create the physical infrastructure, if they didn't have access to the bands that are controlled and parceled out by the government, then they can't go anywhere anyway.
Right. Like one company bottom up, the other ones can't use it, and you're done.
Right. And so that makes sense why the government would step in and require the leasing of bandwidth and blah, blah, blah down the road. Physical infrastructure is different because theoretically there's no upper limit to how much physical fiber you can lay in the ground. So the government doesn't get involved with that.
So where do you stand on it?
I stand very much more on the other side of it. That, yes, I do agree that this is America and we should be able to own things. But it gets a little muddy when you start talking about essential services. And that's why we're evolving where the internet used to be a luxury item. And then, ISPs charge whatever you want. It's a luxury item, blah, blah, blah. We don't care. But if my whole life revolves around the internet, for example, if you go to a hospital, like even if you walk into an ER with a gunshot wound, even if you can't pay, they're going to treat you. And then you'll have to sort it out later. They're not going to deny you essential service because you can't get through the paywall.
I like that you gave this example, though, because I want to try to apply net neutrality here. Let's say that the rule of net neutrality, or the way to apply it, is that all traffic is equal, right? So then it would be first come, first served. So if you have somebody walk in with a broken arm or somebody walk in with a gunshot wound, if the person with the gunshot wound got there second, then they don't get treated until the person with the broken arm has been treated.
This is the fallacy of analogy, because my analogy doesn't equate to the analogy that you're trying to create.
I disagree.
Well, net neutrality, here's the problem. Like, here's an example of what net neutrality was trying to do is if I am an ISP and I have a video on demand service, for example, Cox. Cox Communications is an ISP that also does cable television, okay? They are actively incentivized to create paywalls to hide Netflix, YouTube, Amazon Prime Video, all of the other video delivery services because it's in direct competition to their own. So they are now in a position, like for people that only have access to Cox Internet, to have like, oh, well, you can still have all of these video streaming, but it's part of a premium package. Or you can go with our stuff. It's a little bit cheaper. Like, it's just, it's
Sure.
not,
It's standard competitive practices.
not standard, not standard,
And
not standard competitive practices, because there are areas of this country where there is no choice of what internet service provider you get. If everyone on this planet had access to 10 different ISPs, then I say, yeah, go for it. You guys duke it out. The market will fix this problem. But that doesn't exist. There are huge swaths of the country where there is only one choice, and then people get screwed if there isn't protections in place.
yes, but that thing that you just said about everyone on the planet having access to 10 ISPs, that's not even feasible. Like, there's rural markets and, limitations.
Exactly. Just like there's only one person that provides water service to my house, therefore the government steps in to make sure the water service doesn't screw me over, Ben. Ha-ha.
So I gave the analogy, and I think it's an easy one to apply, is roads. Roads, maybe there was a time back when people just lived and farmed on their farm and it subsisted locally, and that roads were considered a luxury. The first guy with the car that could drive to the next town over, they're like, oh, what a novelty that guy's driving over there in a car. But then
hang on a second, let's make this clear. Romans invented like paved roads in like ancient times, so like the first guy did not see a car.
Yeah, but they were using that to conquest. It wasn't for subsistence.
Yeah, but it wasn't a luxury item either. Never mind. All right,
it kind of was.
We're talking about like roads in America. Okay, go ahead.
But they're a limited resource. Like you can't just have as anybody that wants to drive can, because they become consumed. They're saturated with traffic, or there's problems that come as they reach saturation level that are very analogous to the same kind of things that can happen with internet traffic.
Okay.
And they require maintenance. They have to be plowed when it snows. They have to be replaced when they reach their end of their service life and their materials. All those things are very analogous to, I don't know what snow plowing is. I don't know why I brought that up, but to internet traffic. So we have controls over it. Mostly they're publicly owned, but in some places they're privately owned. There's one way we limit traffic is by having high occupancy vehicle lanes, and we favor certain kinds of traffic.
Okay.
We also have entrance metering. In high urban areas where the roads are in high demand and there's lots of traffic, there will be little lights on the entrance ramps that'll like only allow in a certain amount of traffic, and that helps keep all of the traffic free flowing.
Okay. Do you want to land your plane, or should I start picking it apart now?
No, well, that's what I'm expecting you to do. Just let me finish landing it. There's also places where we have tolls for whatever reason. Just it's unclear the funding and ownership, and they just maintain it through, money collected directly from the people utilizing it at the time. And then there's speed limits that help protect life as people are using it, and maybe also speed limits can be shown to actually promote the free flow of traffic by reducing the overall. I don't know how speed limits do that, but they do. Having people drive slower means less accidents and less stoppage of traffic. Okay, those are the controls that are put into place, and all of those things are analogous to the kind of things ISPs want to do in what's being touted as net neutrality, but which is actually just government interference.
Okay. So that is the argument that ISPs do bring that up, that like, oh, this is government interference. It's going to make everything worse. Okay. The problem is what they focus on this aspect where we're doing a good job. Just let us do our job. We want to give internet to everybody. They don't talk about the other end of the spectrum of the privately owned things, which is where I'm going to start picking apart your analogy. Ben, who owns a majority of the road systems in America?
Well, it would be too broad and sweeping to say the government, because I think you have probably seen the thing I do where you cross the county line and the roads go from good to bad.
Which is a county. It's maintained at the county level.
But it's not always counties. Sometimes it's the federal government.
In general, the government.
Sometimes it's local government, but yes, the government. Okay.
and public authority.
If I cross over the border from Louisiana to Texas, all the traffic lights turn sideways.
Yeah, states that have sideways traffic lights. What are you doing? Like, why?
What the heck's up with that?
Like, what if I'm colorblind? I don't know which one's the green and the red one. You guys are killing me. Okay, so where was I? Lost my train of thought. You sidetracked me with the sideways lights. Okay. The idea here is that the government is trying to maintain roads for everybody's use. You talked about speed limits to reduce the amount of accidents, to keep everybody safer. They talk about the metering onto the freeway to reduce congestion, to make the experience better for everyone. If we had privately owned roads, do you not think that there would be... You talked about tolls, and yes,
we do have privately owned roads, and I've used them. You probably have too.
I probably have too. You're right. But if every road on this planet was privately owned, I can think of neighborhoods that would have garbage roads and neighborhoods that would have amazing roads. And
we also have that with the government, and we do.
But this is the thing. Like, it's so much more compounded in the private sector. Yes, the government is not the best, but it's a little more equitable and more answerable to the public than private corporations are. Like, yeah, we can raise a stink about a private organization, but at the end of the day, if Elon Musk wants to give us the finger, we're not going to stop shopping.
So I like what Elon Musk is trying to do right now. He's like, well, I can't just go out and build a second set of roads to compete, but what I can do is dig a tunnel underneath the city and compete with the people who own the roads on the surface.
I don't know enough about the Hyperloop that he's a mad scientist.
Not just Hyperloop, but also the Boring Company, the one that sold those flamethrowers. Sold the
flamethrowers. Yeah. Listen, all right, Elon Musk is the closest thing we have to an evil genius on the planet that is just doing random things. So I'm not going to comment on half of the random nonsense that he's pulling. I'm just hoping he gets us into outer space in a good way. But we're talking about internet traffic here, man.
Yeah.
I am of the opinion that we are making the transition, like you said, that this is an essential service that we just need in our lives. And traditionally, private sector companies will do everything in their power to screw us up until the point where the government tells them not to.
I don't know why you always think that. I don't know why that's your default. But maybe we will figure that out in the second hour of this program today.
It's my default because all of human history has said that. But okay, we can move on.
All of human history also have governments that do those kinds of things. Okay, so yeah, and I'm ready to move on too. And I just want to say I acknowledge your position on that, and I feel like I'm coming from a slightly different one in that the same way that you need to do triage in a hospital room or give priority to emergency vehicles on roadways, there needs to be that on the internet, and I trust companies in competition as much or more than the government to do that same thing.
So let's be clear, listeners. Like, Ben and I sound like we're very at odds in this topic, and we're at odds in a lot of topics, but this is not a dichotomy, all right? That assuming that there are only two sides of this argument would be a logical fallacy. This is a spectrum of things, and just because Ben's a little bit more on one side and I'm a little bit more on the other doesn't mean that we can't come to an agreement on this.
Nice. Well done. So go check out a starting point for other hot button issues.
Chris Evans, sponsor us.
Maybe. I'll look into that one. I want to talk for a second about something that I only mention as a sidebar issue because I understand that my penchant for watching professional sumo wrestling is not the kind of thing I expect the listeners in our audience to get into. But something happened this week that is of such great magnitude in the sumo world. I've got to talk about it.
Yes, I want to throw in this jab before you launch into this. It's like, I don't expect everybody to be as hardcore sumo fans as I am, but, said the guy who has a full page of notes in the show notes about this sumo match. Please, but I am interested to see how jazzed up you are about it. Please tell us.
The sport of sumo has a long and storied career, and the Japanese have been so meticulous about keeping records that to say someone that's living today is the greatest sumo wrestler of all time is saying like over 500 years worth of people. Like, there is a sumo wrestler by the name of Hakuho Sho, a Mongolian sumo wrestler that's retiring right now, that is so head and shoulders above every other sumo wrestler ever that it's astounding. I'll put a link in the show notes to a video of him. Go watch it, just like 2 minutes of him. He is incredible. Okay, so I got to give you... So, Hakuho Sho just retired after 1,187 bouts in his... 1,187 wins in his career. The next closest person has 100 less than him. Uh, he has the most top division wins by over 100. He has the most. Okay, so he he was so dominant. There was a 2-year period in his career, about 2010, where he won all but 3 matches in an entire calendar year, and they do 90 matches in a calendar year.
I just can I just say that I love that you're so jazzed about this that you want to say so much that it's all getting stuck in your brain trying to get out your mouth.
Okay, so the way sumo wrestling works is right now back in the I think 30s they changed the structure of it, but basically ever since then, in all the odd months of the year, all the professional sumo wrestlers in the Makuchi, which is the top ranked division, it's about 40 guys in 5 ranks. Get together and they match up in like a Swiss round robin kind of tournament for 15 days. 1 match a day for 15 days. And at the end of the 15 days, the guy with the best record wins. And they do this in the odd months, January, March, May, July, whatever.
Look at a calendar.
Up for that. Yeah. And the only rule about sumo matches are over very quickly most of the time, but there's no maximum length. And the way it works is they start off with their fists on the ground and then they go towards each other. And the first person to get their opponent to either step outside of the ring or touch the ground with anything other than the soles of their feet wins. However you do it, everything's game except for striking with a closed fist or pulling hair or losing your diaper.
Oh, you can't rip the other guy's diaper off?
No. They're on there pretty good. I've never seen one come off. But if it does, the guy who it came off of loses.
If you lose
you double lose.
Oh, you lose the match and your pride.
They're called Mawashi. So there's dozens and dozens of what they call kimarate, which are the techniques you can use. You can throw them, you can trip them, you can push them, there's lots of different kinds of throws and stuff. And it has a ton of pageantry and ceremony. I'll put a link to that as well. They have bow twirlers and they do these rituals where they're stomping to scare away the spirits and they throw salt, and it's really cool if you like that kind of thing. But it's also very dignified and solemn, the way you imagine Japanese culture. Like if they win a big match, they're supposed to be real cool and calm about it, not like shout and jump up and down. That would be very frowned upon.
I will say that's one thing that our culture has wrong, is there's no such thing as a dignified winner in America.
Yeah. we like look, if you turn on SportsCenter, you see like top 10 touchdown dances.
Well, Tom Brady wins the Super Bowl and there's confetti and fireworks and everybody is screaming and he's holding the trophy over his head. I just want to see him cool level, put his sunglasses on, couple waves, and then just get in his car and drive home.
Or like a sumo wrestler, bow to his opponent, take the prize, turn around and walk out.
There you go. That should be enforced. NFL, look into that.
So even though sumo wrestling is a Japanese sport, it has been dominated for like the last 20 years by Mongolians. And Hakuho Sho is a Mongolian. And the guy who is now the top ranked guy, now that he's retired, is also Mongolian. And the last 5 before them were all Mongolian. So it's this weird thing. Like it'd be like if baseball was our national pastime and all of our best players were from, like Canada or something. They just come here and win at our sport.
Huh, okay.
Anyway, in 79 Yusho, since promoting to Yokozuna, the highest rank in sumo, he sat out 13 due to injury. He won 63% of the time. That means if Hakuho entered a tournament, 2/3 chance he was going to win. And 14 times he did it with a perfect undefeated 15-0 Zenso Yusho record. Absolutely awesome. Best sumo wrestler. One newspaper this week even questioned if he was perhaps the best athlete of his sport, of any sport.
Oh, if he was just the best athlete?
Yes.
Ugh. You see, when qualifiers like that are nonsensical in
it's
every
also
way.
a good. It's sure is who's better, Michael Jordan or Tiger Woods. It's also something to grab your attention and get you to go take a look. And if that's all I've done, then mission accomplished.
So this is interesting because actually just this week, this is a whole nother thing. Do not ask me about this. I subscribe to YouTube Premium or whatever, and I've had to force the algorithm to relearn all of my preferences. And so I'm getting a bunch of random videos. And one of the videos that I was fed was this 25-minute video documentary a guy made about the greatest javelin thrower of all
You
time.
watched the whole thing? I watched that one too.
That one specifically about the Serbian
the
guy,
Czechoslovakian javelin thrower.
Yeah. That is, what a small world. YouTube.
It was awesome.
YouTube has 3 trillion hours of content, and we both watched the same random video this week.
Yeah, weird.
That's weird.
That was a good one. I'll link that one too.
But this is interesting when we start talking about this. Like, this has got me thinking about, well, he's, like, they say this guy's the best ever, and they have all these numbers and ways to prove it. Like, just like you're talking about with, like, the records and his win rate, and, like, there's all these statistical ways to prove that this guy was the best at his sport that has ever been. But now if we plot that, like if we plot performance over time on some chart and we look at like the spikes like this is a very high spike.
Is it statistically significant?
Well, not is it statistically significant, but over time you would expect that this would happen. As time goes on and the sport becomes more refined and more people dedicate more time, energy, and resources to it, you would expect the overall level of performance to increase accordingly.
Yeah, that's why it's always kind of weird when there's like a world record that hasn't been broken in 30 years.
Right, because 30 years ago, like Olympic athletes were dudes that like did it on the weekend and still had a 9-to-5 job. Yeah. And now people dedicate their entire existence to one thing, so you would hope that he could break world records doing it.
Right, and they have high-tech equipment and trainers and yeah, exactly.
There's a future where we're going to have genetically engineered, and here comes the U.S. Olympic team that has been genetically engineered for 45 years, each one of them specifically designed and made to do this one thing.
It makes you wonder if there's a limit. Because in sumo wrestling, the winner isn't always the biggest guy. Because there's no weight classes in sumo. And sometimes they're comically small compared to the other guy. You could have a guy out there that weighs barely 200 pounds and then a guy out there that weighs over 400.
I would love... All right. I'm going to go to Japan. I'm going to sign up for this thing because I want to get in the ring with a 400-pound guy and just slap him. And then immediately lose and then forfeit for the rest of the tournament. But I just want to slap some big old dudes and have them be totally cool and chill about it.
Yeah, slapping is totally allowed. But then they would pick you up and throw you off the 4-foot wall.
I'd be smiling and laughing the whole way as I'm cartwheeling into the stands.
Completely different subject. So... you and I both existed, at least for a little while, we overlapped in the IT world of the U.S. government.
What a nightmare quagmire that place was.
Yes, well, that's what I want to talk about. So there's been a lot of trends, and just like we talked about with net neutrality, how it's becoming more and more essential to everyday lives, it's also becoming more and more essential to the security of a nation.
Yeah.
And the government has shown itself to be characteristically slow to adapt and change. And as that, it's starting to compound over time. And they've realized that if we are moribund and bogged down in our bureaucratic processes, we can't innovate in, say, cybersecurity, and we'll be vulnerable to our enemies. They can attack us. They can spy on us. They can reverse engineer our stuff, all these things, and we fall farther and farther behind. So the question is, how do we get better? And one of the big trends right now is something called zero trust. The main idea behind zero trust is that our historic understanding of IT security is that we have a strong perimeter and that we don't trust things outside of the perimeter and we do trust things inside the perimeter. But everything has changed so much that idea is false because the perimeter doesn't exist where you think it does, and you can't necessarily trust things that are inside the perimeter. So the next evolution of security doctrine is that the perimeter, there is no perimeter. I don't trust anything.
Yeah, the perimeter exists like on my computer. Everything that is not on my desk could potentially be malware.
So the way this works as a security thing is you lock everything down so that it's self-contained, and then you have a very robust system for identifying things that are trusted independently instead of trusting that someone else verified that before they send it to you.
And there's a ton of ways that you can do this. There's even existing infrastructure that can do this.
Right. So the Air Force was leaning forward a little bit, and they became the first of the services to hire a chief software officer. An executive level, high paid someone that came from a great background is this man named Nicholas Chillian. He's French by birth, but he's an American citizen, and he is a brilliant software architect that had made a name for himself in industry. He's kind of young, but he'd shown that he had the power to, do innovative things. He had lots of accomplishments to his name, and they brought him in and said, revolutionize the United States Air Force. Go. But you don't really get a budget, and you got to follow all these rules, and then they drop all the papers on his desk that break the desk.
Well, and here's the thing. Like these moves like that, these big dramatic headline grabbing moves, when you're talking about the military or the government in general, they just scream of political maneuvering. Like, did they really actually want this guy to come in and revolutionize? Or did they just want to say that they hired a guy to come in and revolutionize and change everything?
I don't know, Josh. It's funny how you can be cynical about the government and companies and not feel like you're being hypocritical, but...
Me? In what sense?
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
That you think the government should run the internet and that everything's going to be okay.
This is okay. You always put me into this corner. We're going back to our net neutrality comment for just a second.
Yeah.
You always paint me into this corner like, oh, like government good, company's bad. That's not ever what I say.
All right.
If I had to choose between with a private company and the government, I think the government will answer to the people better and more often than the private company will. That's the only reason that I'm on that side of the spectrum. Stop making me sound like I'm some kind of hippie over here.
We've documented that on this podcast. Okay. Acknowledge your point. So Nicholas Chillian was brought in to do this. Like you said, it may have been just a political move that was empty, but these things, bureaucracies are heavy and slow moving, and they resist change heavily. Now, I was in the Information Technology Agency for the Ministry of Defense in the United Kingdom for 3 years, and they were doing a very similar thing. But because they're a little bit smaller and they were more nimble, and some astute person in Parliament recognized all of the rules and restrictions that were tying them down, and they brought in a civilian, but they brought him in as a contractor instead of a government employee, and then they put him in charge as the chief IT officer for the Ministry of Defense. And they let him have free reign. And he was breaking rules all over the place. He was breaking their acquisitions rules, the kind of rules that we have in place that are supposed to prevent fraud, waste, and abuse. The kind that could get you put in jail and will stop most innovation and change in the United States military. And he was just breaking rules left and right. And when I got there, we were running 10-year-old computers that were running Windows XP in 2014.
Hang on a second. Windows XP is legit. Don't knock Windows XP.
And it was really backward and behind. And in the 3 years that I was there, they moved the entire enterprise onto IT as a service. And it was impressive. Like to actually see real change in a government agency. And I wish we could do that here.
Well, I actually have an anecdote about this. There was a time in my existence where I was in charge of a large-scale IT system like you're talking about. $multi-million, no fail, blah, blah, all that nonsense. And I had the opportunity to go to DISA, the Defense Information and Security Agency. Is that what it's still called?
Yeah.
Okay. So I went there for like a convention and got to talk to a bunch of really cool people that were at like the top level, like the nation state level of this is how we do computer stuff. Woo!
I think it's Defense Information Services Agency.
That's probably more correct. Anyway, it's like the government IT people. One of the guys was there talking about this program that was on life support that he was trying to keep going. And the idea was that they were trying to reinvent how they did software procurement. Because before you would go to some random software developer, hey, I need this. And it didn't matter how they built it. They would just build the thing and then you would have it. And if it played nice with other software, great. If it didn't, oh well, you got the thing that you asked for. So this guy's whole program was they were trying to standardize, like they were just trying to create a set of rules. These are the rules that thou must operate under in order to make sure your software plays nice with all of our other software. So everything would interconnect and everything that came into the national like IT system would just work together.
Yeah, it makes sense. You could explain that to somebody who doesn't know anything about software engineering, and they would say, that sounds like a good idea.
No. This is the problem that he was having, is because he had a budget of, such and such whatever money, and it was on the chopping block every single year when it came to budget review, because he would go
What value are you adding?
Exactly. He would have to go to the military people that are trying to justify their own jobs with bullets on what I'm doing. And he says, all right, your program costs X amount of dollars. What are you delivering that's better? I am going to deliver you exactly the same capability that you have right now. And like everything that he was trying to do was in the background and possibly better in the future, but unquantifiable. And so he was constantly in threat of having his entire program shut down.
So that's exactly what Nicholas Chillian was brought into the Air Force to do, but on a bigger scale. Because what happened in the military, I'm sure happened in a lot of places that companies realized they couldn't do, was that they were taking a traditional acquisition process. All right, figure out what the business need is, define it, and then go buy something that fills the business need. And it would occur in what's called a waterfall cycle, where you define the requirements and then you send them out for bids and you get bids and you pick the lowest bidder and then they eventually deliver you something and hopefully it was what you needed. But it's too slow and it doesn't ever deliver what you need.
Also, the people that are defining what they need are going to move to a new job in less than 2 years.
Right. Well, yeah. Then there's all that military overhead on top of it. And that was probably Nicholas Chillian's number one complaint. So after 3 years of banging his head against the wall and realizing that he's falling behind in an industry that punishes stale thinking, he realized he needed to move on. So in the tradition of great executives everywhere, and trust me, I love a principled CEO resignation. And I'd like to think this was one. So he went on LinkedIn. I'll put a link in the show notes to his post, and he put this 5-page manifesto of like, I came in, here's all the cool stuff I was able to do, but ultimately I wasn't able to do the main thing they hired me to do because they won't let me. And I can't take it anymore and I'm leaving.
And I'll tell you what, I've read a lot of government documents. I've read enough of these types of things to read between the lines. And this is like the professional equivalent of throwing double deuces at the building as he walks away from it, like, and trying to light it on fire. Like this guy
he was trying to be respectful, but he really was not pulling his punches.
He was super pissed.
Yeah. So he did the traditional, like, everyone that worked for me did a great job. It was just everyone else that screwed us over. So he, made a list of his accomplishments, as you do. But then when he finally got to the part of the article where he's talking about what his actual complaints were, the very first thing he complained about were people like me. I'll read it. Please stop putting a major or lieutenant colonel, despite their devotion, exceptional attitude, and culture, in charge of ICAM, Zero Trust, or Cloud for 1 to 4 million users when they have no previous experience in that field. We are setting up critical infrastructures to fail. We would not put a pilot in the cockpit without extensive flight training. Why would we expect someone with no IT experience to be close to successful? They do not know how to execute on or what to prioritize, which leads to endless risk, reduction efforts, and diluted focus. IT is a highly skilled and trained job. Staff it as such.
So this goes back to one of my biggest complaints about the military, and I'm sure I complained about it many, many episodes ago, is this concept, like the Air Force inherited this Army mentality where an officer is an officer is an officer. An officer right. can be in charge of anything. Yes, you're a cog in the machine. But in the Army, that may be true because probably not even anymore. But like a World War II era Army, sure. Like at this level, you're in charge of infantry. You move to a new job, you're still in charge of infantry. Those career fields are pretty similar. But nowadays in the Air Force or in any organization, everything is so incredibly specialized. You cannot expect a guy that just spent the last 2 years being in charge of the cafeterias on base to transition over and start being in charge of all of the manpower requirements for everybody else.
Right. Or as he's pointing out, you wouldn't take a B-52 pilot and put him in the cockpit of an F-16 without a year of flight training.
Oh, many more years than that. Good Lord, man. Like so many years of training.
Yeah. So I feel him. Like I get what he's saying here. I read some of the responses to this by government people, and they sounded very defensive of the status quo, as you would expect.
Yep.
We're not. This isn't going to have an effect.
Oh,
I don't.
You're saying this resignation?
Know what it's going to take.
You're saying this resignation letter is not going to have an effect on the U.S. military structure? Like, yeah, of course not.
It'll have some.
Have some. Nope. Do you know what's going to take? Do you know what's going to take for the nation to wake up to the critical infrastructure
We
threat that this
talk
guy's
about
talking about.
this in our career field all the time. We call it Cyber Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, exactly. Like I've been out of the military long enough, and I don't know anything on the inside. So this is not any. I'm not divulging national secrets, but as a private citizen that knows a little bit about how computers work, I guarantee you, somewhere in some other country, there is a giant switch on the wall that's labeled U.S. Military Network, and it's currently switched to on. But there's no reason they can't flip it and just shut down the entire military.
Okay, well, as somebody who does know, I'd like to say that I don't think that's the case. I'm going to disagree with that.
I mean, we just saw Russia shut down how many days worth of operations with a random thing that they infiltrated a contractor and then that got installed everywhere.
Yeah. No, you're right. There's reason for alarm, and as Nicholas Chillian points out in this article, without divulging anything, it's trending poorly.
It's only getting worse.
Yeah.
It's funny because we started the computer era with 14-year-olds hacking into the nation state, and then everything got a little bit more secure. But now we're trending back the other direction, where these 14-year-olds around the world have access to so many tools and resources that they can do these kinds of things.
Interesting. All right, that's all I have to say about that. Now, this week I did take a class that was highly classified. I can barely talk about anything from it, but I want to tell you about something that happened in it.
Yeah, an anecdote from the class that doesn't have to do with the classified material.
Yes.
All right, listen, people, you're not getting national secrets on this podcast. If that's what you're here for, well, come for the national secrets, stay for the bad at husbanding. Go ahead.
So, a long time ago, when the government of the United States invented nuclear weapons and was the only one ever to use them in anger against another country, they decided that they probably shouldn't have the military in charge of them fully.
Makes sense.
From here on out. So as they segmented the U.S. government, they says, all right, we'll take the Department of Energy, because nuclear is kind of energy, right? And we'll make them in charge of all of the development and maintenance and engineering of the nuclear weapons. So under the Department of Energy, there's a bunch of weird stuff that's all associated with nuclear weapons. When it actually comes time for using them, the Department of Defense will use them, but the Department of Energy does all the engineering. And one of their engineering groups is called Sandia National Labs. They have a great website. You can go see all the unclassified stuff about them. Anyway, they come around several times. I've had this briefing before in my career where they say, all right, DoD guys that are in charge of using these things, let's tell you about how they're used, how they work. And I get a really cool, really classified briefing about the physics and capabilities and everything associated with nuclear weapons. Well, it also tends to be a bit academic and have a little bit of flex time, and the instructor's really dynamic. I had the same instructor 10 years ago, and he is a blast. His name is Mark Mooman Meyer. He calls himself Moo Man because he was raised on a dairy farm, and he's brilliant, but he likes to play up the I'm a dumb dairy farmer angle to kind of deflect any...
I mean, the guy's in charge of engineering nuclear weapons. He doesn't get to say he's dumb.
Yeah, no, but he gets away with it. He wears a bolo tie, and he talks with a podunk accent, and he gets away with it. So he was basically talking about the situation we're in the world today, whereas the nuclear powers that exist and how their capabilities are has created the current situation we're in, and the U.S. is in a position where they need to decide what to do with our aging nuclear systems.
Okay.
As you probably know, we call it the nuclear triad. The nuclear triad in the United States is our submarine-launched ballistic missiles, our air-launched cruise missiles, and our ground-launched intercontinental ballistic missiles. And there's different reasons and capabilities of those three. They make a Venn diagram, and because all three exist, we believe we have a very stable nuclear deterrence capability against our adversaries that exist in the world.
Okay.
So in this class of maybe 40 people are other officers like myself, but also my boss's boss happened to come in and was sitting at the head of the table. This man is the United States Air Force Global Strike Command Director of Operations.
He's the guy that says, if we're going to use nukes, he's going to be the one to call the president.
Of the three legs of the nuclear triad, he's in charge of two of them. So me, because I like to get lit on fire sometimes, we reach a point in the discussion where we're discussing the nuclear triad and the necessity of it. And I offhandedly suggest that perhaps we could disarm and reduce the number of legs in the nuclear triad.
Because what are they going to do to you? Like kick you out of the Air Force and move you to Louisiana?
Move me to Louisiana and make me retire. So the instructor, I think, recognizes that I've thrown a lit match into a room full of gunpowder kegs. And the general, who is in my direct chain of command, turns and looks at me, and I think he looked at my name tag just to
just mark that down. That guy.
Yeah, that guy is in favor of nuclear disarmament. And I want it on the record that I am. I think that we can have a secure United States of America with less nuclear weapons. And that was the position I was advocating for. And I don't think that compromises my ability to do my daily job supporting the men and women of Air Force Global Strike Command that provide the nuclear deterrence capability for the United States of America.
Yeah, I don't think there's any problem with the doctor that doesn't believe in actual scientific medicine providing medical care to people. He can do those two things and hold them at the same time.
That's a poor analogy, but funny. So he couldn't help, my general couldn't help but devolve into the why do you hate nuclear surety strategy of leadership.
Did you pull? All right, so what did he say? How did he do that?
So the instructor goes, oh, really? So if you think we can reduce the number of legs in the nuclear triad and still maintain our nuclear deterrent, which one of the three do you think we should keep?
Actually, sir, that is a logical fallacy. It's a false dichotomy. We can reduce all of them equally and maintain the same level of readiness, just with fewer weapons.
I wish that I'd had the presence of mind to say something like that. And some of our allies, such as France and the United Kingdom, maintain a single source of nuclear deterrence. And they both use submarine-launched ballistic missiles. So it would have been a very easy to maintain, easy to defend position to say we could have subs, because they have the ability to just disappear and not know where they are and pop up on the coast of some enemy and just present a nuclear threat, relatively low cost compared to the other legs of the triad. But I suggested that our ground-based nuclear missiles would be sufficient.
Oh, you let him paint you into a corner.
Yeah, I should have done like you said. I should have just rejected the question.
Yeah, acknowledge the logical fallacies. Like, you are trying to trap me with an argument.
That's why we learned those on this podcast. But I failed in the moment. Anyway, he turns and pokes me in the chest and he says, "Can you guarantee me that we won't be attacked by China and Russia at the same time?"
Did he say that? Really?
Yeah.
It's like, and you should look back and be like, yes, globalization. Do you have any idea what it would do to the economy?
I wanted to so bad, and I just pulled the eject handle.
Yeah, that's the truth. Because the 2-star could have ended your whole comfort. He couldn't have ended your life, but he could have ended the comfortable portion of your life.
Right. So I just backed down.
Oh, sir, you're totally right. That's my bad. So sorry. That sucks.
I guess I hate nuclear deterrence.
You're right, sir. I'm a hippie. My bad.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes on my next performance evaluation that he signs.
Did he actually poke you in the chest? Did he get physically close enough to do that?
I was sitting close, but we had COVID induced physical social distancing, so I was safe.
Oh, because my response to that would have been like, don't say anything, just take the little daisy and just put it in his lapel. And just, there you go. Like that picture.
The barrel of his gun.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right, Josh, I have a very dramatic bad at husbanding moment this week.
Are there any other kinds of bad at husbanding? When you bad at husbanding, it is always a dramatic, critical thing.
This is an excessively dramatic bad at husbanding moment.
Ooh. All right. I'm on the edge of my seat. Please tell me more.
All right. Let me bring up the chat here. I got to show you a photo. So I'll put this in the show notes for people to look. So as my wife and I have been traveling, I think everyone has to make this decision at some point in your life. Like, as I go around, what are the keepsakes that I'm going to keep that will remind me of the places I've gone? And so my wife and I have decided that one of the things we do is we collect Legos. which is cool and fun. They're fun to build, fun to have. So while we were in England, we picked up this set of Legos that can be assembled into the famous Tower Bridge in London, just outside the Tower of London. It's with the big Victorian towers and the drooping cables and skywalk.
If you think of iconic bridges, this is probably in the top 5.
Yeah, on Earth. People think it's London Bridge. It's not actually London Bridge. It's Tower Bridge.
London Bridge is actually in Arizona for the stupidest reasons ever. But
don't say why. It's best if people didn't know that. If you're listening to podcasts and you don't know that London Bridge is actually in Arizona, it totally is.
Yep, for reasons that don't make any sense. But
okay.
Continue.
So we got this, and as we moved, we had to disassemble it. So it's 4,200 and change pieces. 4,287 pieces. And I'd gotten home from work this week, and my wife had finished assembling it. It was sitting there on her sewing table, and we'd already kind of picked out in advance the location we were going to put it in the house. So in our entryway, there's the staircase, and then 10-foot ceilings, and then the second floor. And right at the top of the staircase, at the peak of the 10-foot ceilings, is a ledge, and it would fit perfectly on there. You'd be able to see it as you come in. It doesn't need to be touched or played with, and it'd just sit there and look nice and be a good reminder. So I came in, saw that she'd finished it, and I said, hey, you finished that. Would you like me to put it up on the ledge for you? And she said, sure, go ahead. I'll help you. So I went out to the garage, and I got the ladder, which is only a 8-foot ladder.
Oh, no. Oh, no. I see where this is going.
Which is only an 8-foot ladder, and she hands it to me, and we start getting an argument about how to hold it.
I feel like I'm the guy in the movie who's like, no, don't go in there.
She says, no, don't hold it like that. I'm like, I'm trying to hold it how you're saying. She says, no, don't hold it like that. I was like, how about like this? She's like, no, that's not it either. I'm like, I think I got it. So I climb up to the top of the ladder. I have it extended. And as I get to head level, which is at about 10 feet in the air, I can feel it start to crumble in my hands. Let me show you the photo.
Oh, no. What?
Zoom in on it.
Oh,
I dropped 4,200 pieces from 10 feet in the air, and it atomized. It broke down into individual molecules.
Oh, and it hit a hard surface too. Oh, dude, you're gonna be finding those pieces behind the fridge for years.
This was 10 hours worth of work to put this thing together, and I vaporized it. How? And my daughter, and of course it made this epic crash, and my daughter comes running and takes a photo from the top of the stairs. So I'll put that on the Facebook page, so you can go look at my horrible bad at husbanding moment.
And in true Instagram fashion, one of the words is horribly misspelled.
Yeah, I think autocomplete or something. My daughter did that. Anyway, so yeah, our $400 Lego Tower Bridge was vaporized.
Ben, look at me as I'm talking to you right now. Okay, all right, if this Lego set meets these 3 criteria, it needs to be craggled. And there's no excuse for not doing it.
Go ahead, give the criteria. This is great. I'm making an infographic.
Okay. Is this Lego set for adults or children?
Adults.
Is this Lego set's primary purpose display or for playing?
Display.
Will you ever disassemble this Lego set?
I don't know why Alicia disassembled it when we moved. I think she enjoyed putting it together, but I don't think she wanted to do it twice.
Then, sir, craggle that thing, because it's not a Lego set. It's a keepsake. It's an ornament. It's like a bust of Caesar. You're not going to take it apart when you move. You're just going to move it.
Oh, man. I cannot believe how many pieces it came into when I dropped it.
It came into all 4,000. I know how many pieces it came into. 4,287.
It vaporized, and I just stood there on the ladder staring down at it.
Oh,
not
my
being
goodness.
Able to believe that this happened.
Oh my stars. I can't believe how fragile this thing that's made of tiny plastic pieces that are connected by nothing but friction. I can't believe how much it fell apart when it dropped it from 10 feet onto tile.
Oh my gosh, John. So that was my bad at husbanding moment this week.
Craggle that thing next time. If you ever find all the pieces, which I'm postulating you never will.
Okay, do you see how it's next to a closet?
Yeah,
Yeah, I
you're gonna
found some of the
find
pieces like
You're gonna find pieces
in the closet.
No. You're gonna find pieces in pockets in jackets that are folded on the top shelf in that closet. There's no
It was
way
that bad.
you're not finding any of these pieces, man.
It was that bad.
Outstanding. Good job. Way to drop a Lego set. How many ways are there to hold a Lego set? You hold it from the bottom, Ben. It's being held together by gravity and friction.
Okay. All right. I'm glad you mentioned that because I was about to move on, but I think there's one important point I need to talk about since this is bad at husbanding. There are times in our life where we have our little personality quirks that most of the time just fall below the noise level of causing a crisis.
Okay.
You know, like if you are the kind of person that gets annoyed when they tell you to pull forward in the drive-thru. Like most of the time, that kind of thing isn't going to come up and cause a crisis. But every now and then, a situation comes up where just it magnifies your personality flaws into 4,287 pieces on the floor. So when she handed it to me, I wanted to support it underneath the bottom.
Okay.
And she said, "No, hold it like this." And she had her fingers underneath the arches.
Okay, so I know the position. I can foretell the position that you're in as a husband. Time froze, record scratch. Okay, she's telling me to hold it in a way that's going to cause 4,287 pieces worth of headache in my near future. But you have to weigh that against the, honey, I'm going to do it the right way, and the way that you're telling me to do it is dumb. Like saying those words
yes. That's exactly what happened. But there wasn't a lot of hostility in it. I also just thought, I love her, and even though she's telling me to do a way that kind of doesn't make sense, it'll probably work out anyway, so I'll just do it her way and maybe get away with a 2-for-1 here. Do it the wrong way and have her feel like I trusted her.
Oh, dude, you approached this from the wrong direction. What you should have done is teed up the I told you so moment. You go, okay, sweetheart, I'm going to hold it the way that you are telling me to, even though this is clearly the wrong way to hold it, and I'm going to end up dropping and breaking this thing. And then, when you drop and break it, you can just look at her and shrug like, you see, I told you so.
Yeah, that's interesting. But there's always be that possibility that you did it on purpose.
Okay, hang on a second. This is interesting. Let's extrapolate this phenomenon that you're talking about, because I experienced this
Just a little experience that comes up in life that magnifies your personality flaws or the conflicts or things.
Well, just you end up in a situation where if you had stopped for 5 seconds, everything would have been fine, just fine.
Yeah.
But for some reason, there was some artificial urgency that made you make a snap decision that ended in tragedy.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so
what's yours?
Oh, God, Ben. So the saga of me remodeling my bathroom continues. This has nothing.
Yes.
This has nothing to do with bad at parenting, or bad at husbanding, or nothing like that. But here's what the problem. I got 90% completed with the bathroom. Everything's tiled. Everything's great. Great. It looks lovely. I'm gonna do the floor, and I start tiling the floor, and I get Ben. There was only four. There was 4 tiles on the floor. Okay. Mortar is still wet. Everything is still undoable. But then I laid the next one, and I realized, wait a minute. And there was a height difference between the tile I was laying and the drain of the shower. To that, it was like half an inch. The drain was half an inch higher than the tile that I was laying, and I recognized that as, this is not going to work.
Right. You'll always have a pool of water in your shower.
Yes. And so here's the thing. Here, in hindsight is 2020.
I get it. No, this is brilliant. This is the moment where you had all this go through your head and you had to, go for it.
There's this artificial urgency that the mortar is drying. I have to do something. I have to fix this problem right now. Fix it right now. And the solution that my brain landed on was pour 400 pounds of mortar on the floor to create an artificial 1-inch thick layer of concrete so the tile comes up to meet the drain.
Oh.
What should I have done, Ben? I should have taken 5 seconds and recognized, you know what? This drain is going to be a problem. Pulled up the 4 tiles that I had on the floor, swept up the mortar, and then stepped back and then take the time to assess and figure out what the best solution to this problem would have been. Because after I panicked and put 400 pounds of mortar on the floor and had a horribly uneven tile job because they were all just floating on wet concrete, I realized, at the beginning of this, I could have just unthreaded the drain and put one in that was a different shape, and it would have sank down farther, and it would have been just fine, just fine. So I ended the
Yeah.
the short version of the story. All right, again, thank you to my brother and my father who are registered contractors. I was willing to let it go because I'm so sick of remodeling the shower. They convinced me to jackhammer up the 400 pounds of mortar that I put on the floor and do it right. And so I actually just finished today putting down the new layer of tile
Wow.
the way that I should have done the first time with a new shaped drain. And guess what? Everything went exactly as it was supposed to.
Okay, I don't want to miss the opportunity to do root cause analysis here. So when you were at the inflection point, like you said, there was this artificial pressure to make a decision right now. Why did you make the wrong decision?
I honestly, like, looking back, it was the dumbest decision that I could have possibly made. But I think it was this other artificial pressure that has been building up in time. When I first put into my brain that I'm going to redo the shower, I had this timeline, this artificial timeline where I can get 90% of this done in the long weekend for Labor Day at the beginning of September. Ben, we are recording this on October 2nd, and I am still not done. And so every day that goes by and the shower is not completed past my artificial deadline that didn't make any sense because I've never redone a shower before. It's adding this should have been done. It's
your Halloween costumes. It's studying for your CPA exam.
All this, and it's just this back pressure of this.
You saw this moment where all the extra work flashed before your eyes, and you're like, no, I just got to get through this.
Yes, I'm just going to power through. It's going to be fine. And I convinced myself that this is a solution that will work. I can do this, but it didn't. It was terrible.
So it was hubris. That's what it was.
It was hubris and an overwhelming desire to just have this task off of my plate.
Yeah.
So what was your artificial inflection point? What made you decide to grab the Legos the wrong way?
It was almost the exact same thing that you described. At one point, I thought, I'm doing this wrong, but it's going to be okay anyway.
Okay.
And then there was this instant where I'm holding the towers like I'm holding C hands that are parallel to the ground, and I felt them start to crush in my hands.
Yeah, that's bad.
And my grip just vaporized, and then smashed.
There was two halves that fell. There was the halves that were underneath your hands, and this half that was on top of your hands. Both hit the floor and then shattered. All right. Oh, yeah. Here's a question. So as your grip was disintegrating, you inevitably would have ended with fists that had Legos in your hands. Did you?
I dropped them.
Did you just drop them from the height? Yes. That's what I wanted. When
I just dropped the ones that were in my hands. It was like, I can preserve these 10 pieces that are still hooked together. Nope, drop them.
Screw it. 10 feet. Go join your friends.
All right, that's a good place to move on. So it's time for Bad at Logic. For this week's Bad at Logic, we're going to do a logical fallacy. Oh crap! I looked up how to pronounce this and then I forgot.
All right, so it's a very complicated word to pronounce, and I'm gonna spell it for our listeners. It's two words. The first word is TU. The second word is QUO. QUE. This is the kind of phrase that you would get at a national level spelling bee. And
yeah,
I would just wing it. I'm perfectly happy making crap up all the time, but Ben had to look up the pronunciation online.
On Wikipedia, it says tu quoque.
You see, okay, go ahead. Tu quoque.
The logical fallacy of tu quoque, in Latin it means you also, is avoiding having to engage with criticism by turning it back on the accuser, answering criticism with criticism. This is like one of the oldest strategies in the bad relationship book. Why didn't you pick up the socks off the floor? You left the dirty dishes in the sink last night. Wait, you're born knowing how to do this. Tu quoque.
This is the classic counter argument that you see all the time on national TV between two people. This is just what you do. This is when you just start ignoring the other person and just go on the attack. They made me mad. Well, you know what? I might, but, or what about this? It's just nonsensical, not productive. It just devolves into name calling at that point.
If the subject is the sock on the floor, the dirty dishes don't have anything to do with it. But for some reason, our brain's like, yeah, what about that?
Well, and this goes back to the people having fragile egos again. She's pointing out, I left my sock on the floor. And you know what? I did that. And at some level, you acknowledge that was wrong and you shouldn't have done that. But that means that you would have to accept the blame and the punishment and the ego blow that is, I am not perfect. So no, screw that. Let's change the subject. What about the thing that you did that's also not so perfect, huh?
Yeah, too quoque. So what I want to do, Josh, and I hope our audience realizes this, it feels like one of the core values of the Bad at Magic podcast is that we're educating you with new vocabulary, ways to think about the world around you, and ideas that then you can use and apply in your everyday life. So this week, you sent me a text that was a link to an article on, what was it on?
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
It was on The Bulwark.
It was on the internet.
It was called Nicki Minaj and the Death of Responsibility. And it was related to controversy swirling surrounding getting vaccinated for COVID-19.
So I found this article interesting because Nicki Minaj basically tweeted a friend of a friend anecdote about why you shouldn't get vaccinated for COVID-19. And this article was from the other side of the perspective. It's from a person saying, you know what? You've got a ton of Twitter followers and you shouldn't be tweeting this.
She has, I'm looking at it right now, 22,918,478 Twitter followers.
Right. And so the premise of this article was that it is almost criminally irresponsible for Nicki Minaj to tell 22 million people this thing that she had absolutely no way of confirming or making or believing, or wasn't grounded in reality. This friend of a friend story that is actively going to it might influence people against getting something that a lot of reputable sources are saying is good for you.
Right. So what I want to do in the vein of Bad at Logic is we're going to dissect Nicki Minaj's tweets utilizing the biases and logical fallacies that we've learned on the Bad at Magic podcast.
Wait a minute, hang on. We're skipping past the entire text message argument that we had about
I
it.
don't want to get into the text message argument.
Oh.
Go ahead if you want to.
So Ben and I had a text message argument back and forth about this whole thing, and it devolved into this logic. Like we were pointing out the logical fallacies on both sides. But it turned into this interesting discussion. That's why we're talking about it now as part of Bad at Logic. Is there's a difference between how to apply Bad at Logic. You can't just point out these logical biases that both people are making, or the fallacies and the biases, and discredit their opinions. That's not what it's about. Everybody makes these fallacies and biases all the time. That doesn't mean that they're necessarily wrong or that they're necessarily right. All it does is let you analyze their arguments in a clearer sense.
Right. So the way the controversy unfolded is this is only a week ago. It was on the 13th of September. Nicki Minaj puts out this tweet, and then a news anchor on MSNBC criticized her for basically saying, because you have so many followers, you need to be more responsible with the information you're putting out there because it could affect people. And then Nicki really took that personal and then attacked that NBC news anchor, and then there was some fallout. And so this is the article about it. But I just took Nicki Minaj's 3 tweets that were quoted in the article and that are still up on her Twitter page, and I just looked for biases and logical fallacies.
Excellent.
Okay.
So in one tweet, in 240 characters, how many logical biases or fallacies was Nicki Minaj able to squeeze in?
At least 10.
Oh, that's outstanding.
At least 10.
The character to bad logic ratio there is so high.
It's astounding. Okay, so she says, my cousin in Trinidad won't get the vaccine because his friend got it and became impotent. His testicles became swollen. His friend was weeks away from getting married. Now the girl called off the wedding. So and now she changes voice. She's talking to her followers. So just pray on it and make sure you're comfortable with your decision, not bully.
Now, I want to take a second and point out that when Ben said because, she wrote cuz, C-U-Z. When Ben said your, she wrote you are. She's saving characters, I get that, but it also, you're trying to make an argument against science. Use proper punctuation and spelling.
Okay, so, my cousin in Trinidad won't get the vaccine because his friend got it and became impotent. That is a very, assertion of fact. There's definitely a negativity bias there and a false cause.
And also
logical fallacy.
Do we have a friend of a friend fallacy in here yet? You're not.
That's the next one.
Okay, go ahead.
His testicles became swollen, which is anecdotal logical fallacy. It could have been for any of a number of reasons.
Well, and also the reporter in the article pointed out that he did some research and there was absolutely no like reported cases tied to this about that.
There's no suggestion among any of the side effects of COVID-19 or the vaccine associated with this particular symptom.
Yes.
His friend was weeks away from getting married and, now the girl called off the wedding. I think there's probably something else going on there. So I'm going to say that's false cause fallacy and a self-serving bias. So just pray on it, which sounds nice, but is begging the question, like, well, now that I've thrown out some false evidence that this might not be a good thing, maybe it's not good for you either. And make sure you're comfortable with decision, belief bias, which we've also covered on this podcast, not bullied, to quoque.
Yep, that we just learned that one. Like, she's just like bullied. Like, there's nobody bullying you to go get the COVID-19 vaccine.
Yeah. So Joanne Reed goes on MSNBC and says, Nicki, you have a huge megaphone and the consequence of using it is immense. And Nicki got really mad at this. Her next tweet was really bad. So here's the next one. Apologies for language. A lying homophobic coon is her first words out of her mouth.
Ugh.
I guess I can join the reindeer games too, right? ? People, spelled PPL, can go on TV and lie on me. I can report on them too, right? Then she puts a very innocent looking smiley happy face, and then there are two images below. Doesn't have to be truce, it can be half troops. Uncle Tomiana, which I think is supposed to be a female version of Uncle Tom, which is a racial slur, asked who on earth would trust the US FDA guys, ... And then she put at Joanne Reed, which was the MSNBC anchor. And then she has links to two articles about Joanne Reed. One is a tweet of her questioning why someone should trust the FDA, which is pointing out the hypocrisy of her opponent in this situation. And then another one accusing her of making homophobic comments. So let's break this one down.
Well, first of all, the racial slur at the beginning is an ad hominem.
Right. That's an ad hominem fallacy. And then the reindeer games is to quoque again.
I feel like this whole thing is like to quoque. It's like a to quoque burrito.
As well as reactance bias, which is you made me mad, I can do whatever I want back. And then she asks a loaded question, also a fallacy. And then she says, it doesn't have to be truce. It can be half truce, which is the fallacy, meaning because you are wrong about something else, you're wrong about this.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
And then she calls her Uncle Tom, which is another ad hominem attack, attacking her character instead of her argument. And then she said, who on earth would trust the US FDA, which is the fundamental attribution error. And then she gives another ad hominem attack for good measure.
Well, the whole FDA thing drives me nuts because everyone, like, listen, you trust the FDA every day. Every day you trust the FDA. Have you bought something from a grocery store? Have you eaten something that you purchased in the last 24 hours? Guess what? You're trusting the FDA.
Yeah. So then after this, the tweet storm ignites. Some of Nicki's followers are concerned for her. They're like, Nicki, this is really bad logic here. Lots of people are getting the vaccine, and there's a lot of mounting evidence that shows that you're 11 times more likely to die if you don't get the vaccine. You really should consider this. Nicki tweets back, babe, that's not true. I had the exact same symptoms as people with the damn vaccine. So, and that is the anecdotal fallacy and confirmation bias.
So this goes back, like, yeah, thank you, Ben. That was outstanding. Thank you for breaking down. People, this is how you can apply this in your life. Look at these things that you see on Facebook. Listen to the words that the news is telling you, and be able, if you can identify the biases and the fallacies that they are using, you can realize that, well, hang on a second, parts of this aren't this argument
does not follow.
This argument that he is presenting, like 2/3 of it are garbage. They're just things to make you think that he knows what he's talking about. Maybe there's meat there, maybe there isn't. But being able to break it down, we can see what's true and what's not.
So here's the underlying question in the land of the free and the home of the brave in the Second Amendment, Josh, or First Amendment.
First Amendment.
I can't remember.
Second Amendment is right to bear arms, dude. How do you not know that?
Sorry, First Amendment. I corrected myself. Do people with large Twitter followings have a responsibility to be right?
So
Do they have a right to be wrong?
it's an interesting question because are they required to be correct about everything? I don't think so. But like this situation is not so much about being right or being wrong. It's about my feelings. Here are my feelings, and 99% of the time that's fine. You can have whatever feelings you want. Where it starts to become a problem is like in this specific circumstance is it's not just her feelings. She is basically telling 22 million people, do not go do this thing that mounting evidence suggests is good for everyone on the planet, including you, and do something different instead. Like, where does the responsibility lie for her to justify her position or be right? Like, does she have one? Or is it just her? I said this before, and like in the world of social media, everybody has a soapbox. And Nicki Minaj, are we really wanting somebody like nothing bad about Nicki Minaj? I mean, she's a wonderful singer, but I'm sure she's a terrible pathologist. Do we want her to be giving advice about vaccinations to 22 million people that don't know any better than to listen to her?
So Facebook and Twitter have tried to take this on. Like if I put a post on Facebook and I say something about COVID-19, they just put a little blurb underneath my post that says like, if you want information about COVID-19, click here. And I kind of like that approach. It's non-attributional. It doesn't necessarily call what you said into question. It's just kind of like, hey, get the facts, people.
Yeah, and
I think that's a good approach to take without going to making Nicki have to be right about things or taking away her freedom or just letting her say whatever she wants irresponsibly.
I think that's where this conversation gets kind of muddy, is because there is a shared responsibility. It's not just like we can't just say, "Oh, Nicki Minaj is wrong for saying this," but we also have to.
Yeah, it's not like the vaccine came out last week. These 22 million people, probably most of them have gotten this shot.
Well, at the same time, there is a level of responsibility these 22 million people have for making a decision about the vaccine. That I mean, if you want to factor in Nicki Minaj's personal thoughts about it, then maybe you should make better life choices. But but what level of responsibility is on her even saying it in the first place? I say that is a non-zero number. I don't think she's 100% responsible for everything that she says because she's allowed to have opinions just like everybody else. But it is definitely non-zero. She needs to be held accountable for spouting random nonsense to 22 million people.
So I think this is the accountability. That she said this, that an anchor on a news network picked up on it, challenged her on it, and they went back and forth on it. That is democratic accountability.
That is us trying to, like us, Ben and Josh talking about her on the Bad at Magic podcast. Nicki Minaj, go ahead and sponsor us if you feel like it. That is us holding her responsible for tweeting random nonsense.
The thought of her sponsoring the podcast just is hilarious. Yeah, but she just has her opinions and she's just another person like you and me. Now, we keep saying 22 million followers, but I don't follow her. Do you?
But what does that mean? Like, just because I don't follow
that means
her,
that it's more than 22 million.
Hang on. Yeah, okay. Well, you're right, because we don't follow her, but we know about these tweets.
Right.
So, all right. So then it becomes a different conversation. From my perspective, she has a non-zero percent responsibility in the crap that she puts onto Twitter. So how? Like, I guess you already said it.
Okay, I'm going to force your hand.
Okay.
What percent then? If it's non-zero, what percent is it?
If somebody that read her tweet, if somebody decided not to get vaccinated because of her tweet, I think she has 5 to 10% responsibility for that decision.
Wow. We try these things in a court of law occasionally, and they do seem this tenuous. You see them from time to time. Like somebody dies at a traffic light, and they're like, well, so-and-so told me I could ignore that traffic light or whatever. Like, is that person liable or not? And we'll put it in front of a jury and let them decide.
Well, it becomes like, let's forget Nicki Minaj for a second. Do people that tweet their information onto the interweb, my random thoughts. If I went onto Twitter today and said burritos can cure cancer, how much responsibility do I owe to the world at large for my random nonsense if people believe me?
So we have a heuristic for this. We use it typically in the debate of free speech. We call it shouting fire in a crowded theater.
There you go. That's the classic example of what we're talking about.
Right.
My
There are certain things you could say that aren't allowed.
Yes, because they are actively bad. This falls into that gray area where it
Yeah.
might be bad and it might like be detrimental to all of human civilization. Nicki Minaj. But like, how do we have a responsibility then, not just to hold her? Yeah, do we have a responsibility to hold her accountable? Like, does it
Yeah.
swing all the way? Is this bad enough to swing the meter to the side where now we need to take action to correct this kind of behavior?
Okay, it's my turn to make a numbered list. So I think, and this is there's probably legal textbooks written about this, but until you can prove that somebody made a bad decision specifically and only because of this, and that it resulted in a negative outcome, and that the person that influenced them to do it did it on purpose, then we can hold them accountable. And because those three things will never happen, this kind of stuff will continue to fly below the radar.
Ooh, man, this really makes me want to talk about January 6th, but we're not going to do that because that's a loaded gun, and I'm not picking it up today.
All right, let's lighten the mood a little bit. It's time for Bad at English.
Yay! Everybody's favorite segment where Ben talks about stupid things that the British people say.
I'll make it quick. This one is one that I heard time and again, and when I looked it up on the internet, it said dated informal. The phrase is tickety boo.
Tickety boo.
Tickety boo.
All right, no, you're not. This is not flying. You are testing me. You lifted this straight out of Mary Poppins. There's no way this is a real thing that people say.
I wrote this down in my notebook because a friend at work said it.
In a professional setting?
Informal professional setting.
Tickety boo?
Tickety boo.
Oh, you must tell me what this means.
It just means everything is good, everything is fine.
Shut up.
Yeah.
No.
Yes.
All right.
There's still some of those phrases you think we would only use ironically in a mocking Dick Van Dyke accent, like Bob's your uncle, but they still say Bob's your uncle and tickety boo. Sometimes.
If I had to quantify my respect for the United Kingdom, it just decreased like a statistically significant percentage, knowing that people actually say the phrase tickety boo that are over the age of 5.
All right. So everything's tickety boo. All right. It's time for a quick board game survivor. So we only played one this week. The game is called Dobble. It fits in a little tin the size of your fist. It's just a stack of cards with little tiny icon pictures on them. Maybe each one has about 20 icons on them. And you can play about a dozen different varieties of games with it. You have a group of people, and you can play one, for instance, where you're trying to gather as many cards as possible. So you turn over the stack of cards. Everyone has one card. They have to find an icon on their card that matches one in this pile in the center. When they say it, they shout it out and grab the card. You go till they're all gone.
Ooh, I played that. All right, so we have a version of that exact game, but it's for little kids, and it's got animals on it, and there's only like probably 10 animals on each card.
Yeah. Basically, it's the exact same game, but simplified for smaller children.
Yeah, so I probably talked about this in the podcast before, but before my wife clued me in that, hey, we're letting the kids win, I destroyed my children in like 2 rounds of that before I caught on to like, oh, right, they're 5. I need to slow down.
It's supposed to let them win. Yeah, is it called Spot It? Is that the game?
I think that's the game.
Yeah, I think they're both the same game. It's just they renamed it Dobble. They decided they needed a less generic sounding name, but that's not an improvement.
Well, when you said Dobble, I thought it was going to have something to do with house elves and getting them clothing. So
no, it wasn't an improvement. You can also do other versions of the game where like you have your cards and you're trying to get rid of them, so you look at the other people's cards and you match yours with theirs, and then you give them your cards. Stuff like it. There's lots of fun ways to do it. This is a winner. So I went through the list that we've done on this podcast.
This one's a winner. They're all winners in Board Game Survivor. Everybody survives.
Okay,
Yay!
I'll call it Board Game Spotlight. So we went through the list of 10 things every game needs that we've done on this podcast: a goal, rules, interaction, a catch-up feature, inertia, surprise, strategy, fun, flavor, a hook, and this podcast also added that you need to minimize downtime. Of those 11 things, Dobble scores a solid 8 out of 11. Good game.
Solid. Nice.
So while I was having this discussion with my family about the game, we mentioned something my family used to do back in 2002 timeline. My kids were young, we were poor, we just graduated from college, we were looking for stuff to do, and my kids loved the planes landing at Las Vegas McCarran Airport. So there was a parking area right in the middle of the runway, so we would drive there in our truck and we would back up to the runway and lay out a blanket in the bed of the truck and play board games and watch the planes take off and land. And my wife mentioned that we used to play the game Candyland. And it's well documented on this podcast that we think that's a horrible game.
Absolutely terrible.
So I was trying to figure out why we played it, and my son brought up a reason that we hadn't considered and isn't really contained in any of these rules. And that is that Candyland is simple enough to be very accessible to the youngest of children.
Interesting. Because it's such a terrible game, anybody can play it.
Right. And it made me wonder, like, how good can a game be, but also be accessible to, like, a 2-year-old?
A 2-year-old?
So I scored Candyland on the 11 things I just listed, and it only scores in 4. It has a goal, it has rules, there's a little bit of surprise because you don't know what color you're going to turn over, and it has some flavor because of the candy theme. But other than that, there's no interaction, there's no catch-up feature, there's no inertia, there's no strategy. It's not that much fun. It doesn't really have a hook, and it definitely doesn't minimize downtime. It's just a bad game.
Oh,
but I couldn't think of an example of a good game that you can play with a 2-year-old.
So this is interesting. It's almost like another criteria, another axis on this equation.
Yes.
That is simplicity. Because but it's almost like a sliding scale. The more simplistic a game is, the less likely it is to have the other aspects that adults are going to enjoy, but it makes it more accessible to the younger children.
I think that's why movie reviewers always point that out when you get that magical, good animated feature that interests children but appeals to adults.
Yeah, this is a kid's movie that has just enough innuendo and over the kid's head humor that you won't go blind watching it.
Right. Or the other way around, like Inside Out, that plays to the kids like a colorful action movie they can get into, but it really has a lot for you to chew on mentally if you're a grown-up.
Like, how does Joy cry? That keeps me up at night. How does the personification of joy cry?
I love that you were ready with that. Okay, that's all I had to say for our board game spotlight.
Yeah, thank you. Because everybody, like, you're talking about board game Survivor, like it's this dog eat dog Lord of the Flies scenario, but taking place on a cruise ship in the most stupid way possible. Everybody's there to have a good time. It's fine.
Until we've eliminated enough on our list that we get down to the ones that sit there in the back of the closet and are kind of dusty that nobody wants to bring out.
Oh, is that what's happening?
So
we're chewing through the entire collection, and everybody's grabbing their favorites first.
Yes. So it might start getting a bit dicey towards the middle to end.
It's gonna get a little get a little murdery when it comes to board game Survivor. Okay, let's keep it as Survivor then, because maybe the best contestants are up first.
So for our main segment today, I propose that we talk about something I throw on the back burner that could just, be an easy discussion to do. And that is, what are you brand loyal about, to what degree and why? So listeners, as you hear us discuss our brand loyalties, if you have some of your own you want to throw in, we'd love to hear them. You can go on Bad at Magic subreddit or on our Facebook page and join in on the discussion.
All right, Ben. So this is going to be a fun thing because when we talk about brand loyalty, brands exist in categories of things. Like you talk about a company typically makes just like one genre of stuff, unless you're talking about GM that makes everything. So I think it's going to be fun that we could probably trade this blow for blow. If you have a brand loyalty, I can probably come back with the same kind of brand that I am loyal to. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yes. So let me start off with a car brand I'm loyal to, and that is Toyota.
Why are you loyal to Toyota, Ben?
So there's like this, I could give you like the grown-up answer, like I own a Toyota now because it's reliable and it has good safety ratings and those kinds of things. But really, when I was a kid and I was a teenager and I first had freedom, my best friend had a car and it was like a 1990 Toyota Camry. And when I rode in that car, I felt free. It just felt like this car provided me with something I'd never had before. We had great discussions in it. We went on we went on double dates, we had adventures, and this car was the thing that enabled that and just lifted my soul. So I kind of tied that feeling to that brand of car. And when I got back from my missionary service and bought my first car, I bought a 1990 Toyota Camry. And that was our first car that we like drove around in until we outgrew it with 3 car seats in the back.
Nice. All right.
And
that's a good reason to be loyal to a brand. So I when we talk about cars, I actually have a brand loyalty to Ford, and it's instilled in me in 1,000 different data points throughout my entire life, and it all sums up to this idea that, like, my family had different styles of trucks, different makes of trucks growing up. Distant relatives had different makes of vehicles that I drove in, but I had this idea that built into my mind. And I realized that this is where Ford lives in my mind right now. If you get a Ford and you change its oil when you're supposed to, that car is going to be beautiful and perfect for you until you hit 150,000 miles. And then the entire thing is going to disintegrate as if you dropped it from a 10-foot cliff onto tile. But like that's clear expectations on what you can get for this vehicle. It's going to be exactly what you expect it to be until you hit this point, and then it's just going to be garbage. And that's reliability.
And that's a stereotype. That's not necessarily true.
No, absolutely.
There's certain models where that's probably true.
I've had multiple Ford vehicles, and they treated me very, very well right up until that point when they started giving me trouble. And I realized, like, oh, this is the point where I dropped it from a 10-foot height.
So
I'm replacing
your
something else.
truck that you just sold when you bought the electric car, had it reached 150,000? Is that what?
And
happened?
It reached 140,000 miles, and it was starting to give me recurring troubles. I'm like, I see where this is going.
Okay, so why didn't you buy a Ford electric car?
Oh, because I sat in the Mustang Mach-E, and it was a joke.
Yeah.
Like, they say, oh, it's a 4-door car. I sat down, I adjusted the driver's seat to the point where I could comfortably, like, operate the vehicle, and I turned around, and just like the Mustang that I had when I was a bachelor,
the front seat was touching
the front seat was touching the back seat. The back seat was a shelf. Like, that's not usable when you have 2 kids.
Okay. So the point you're making there is that there's limits to your brand loyalty, which I think is is important, because I'm loyal to Toyota, and of the 3 cars that I own, 2 of them are Toyotas.
So here's the thing: is I think brand loyalty for me in my life is that if I need to make a snap, quick decision, these are the brands that I'm gonna go with, like the brands that I have loyalty to. If I am forced into a situation where I need to think about it, then all bets are off. I'm going to look at all of my different options, and I'm going to explore and do my due diligence and my research. But like, it's just a default thing. If we were just going to get another gas engine car, like if I was going to get an internal combustion engine car, I guarantee I would have some flavor of Ford in my driveway right now.
Okay. Yeah, and there's also different tiers of decisions. Like buying a car is a huge one-time decision. Like I can love every Ford I see drive past on the road without owning one and feel like I'm being brand loyal. But when it actually comes time to buy a car, I'm going to buy one that I need, that fits my needs.
Yeah, that applies to all of these brand loyalties.
Yeah. Okay, so my second one on my list is Intel. This came up because you've recently been building computers, and you asked me why I was so loyal to the Intel, the maker of processors. And I realized it just goes back a long way. It's the same kind of thing. When I was 17, I helped build a computer, and it had an Intel processor. And after that, I always just followed Intel. And even though other competitors came up, I always just felt loyal to Intel. Then I moved to Oregon, lived right across the street from the Intel plant there, and had a lot of friends who worked at the plant. And then I felt like I had a personal connection as well.
Which has absolutely nothing to do with the quality of the product that you were purchasing, but I get that.
But brand loyalty can be based on other things as well.
Fair enough. So I don't have a processor or CPU brand loyalty at this point. Like I'm running an AMD Ryzen because it's just better bang for your buck. You're wasting money on Intel. I will die on that hill if you want me to, but we don't have to go into that today.
Well, what other kind of tech things do you have brand loyalty?
So if we're talking about tech things, like for computer stuff, that's through that category of computer stuff. I have a loyalty to Razer peripherals. Like if you go on our website, badatmagic.live, I talked about my entire computer setup at great length, and I have multiple input-output devices that are Razer branded, and I am happy with all of them. My first mechanical keyboard that I ever bought, I bought in 2008, and that's the same keyboard that I'm still using, and it's a Razer Black Widow. They're on like the third version. I've got the OG original. I just upgraded to the wireless version of their Death Adder mouse. I am currently listening on, I don't know the model name of the headset, but it's wonderful. This is easily the greatest, most comfortable, best sounding headset I've ever owned. And I just love all the Razer products. If I'm going to get
Nice.
if I'm going to get a new keyboard, it's going to be a Razer Huntsman 60% T10 keyless, but we don't have to go into that right now.
But you're ready to if you need to. You bring up an interesting area, and that is there's probably things like this where whatever the reason or background that we have a brand loyalty is, there could be something where the other person just doesn't. Like I'm looking around at the peripherals I have, I don't even know what their brands are. And when I make a decision, I'm not even considering it. I'm just like, oh, does that one feel good in my hand, or is it the right colors? I have a Microsoft mouse and an HP keyboard, and like I don't even care.
Oh, you're killing me, man. That's probably a membrane keyboard. Like if you're interacting with this more than like 2 hours a day, you need to put some thought into it.
Yeah. Yeah. And there we've stumbled into an area where you have a lot of opinions and preferences surrounding it, and I really don't. It just meets the threshold of good enough for me that it doesn't go rise above my noise level. If I struggled with it because like the backspace key was right next to the power key or something like that nonsense, or the mouse was hurting my wrist or something, then I would start to go, maybe I better look into this. But because none of that stuff happens, I don't care.
I'm going to get you a mechanical keyboard for Christmas, and I'm going to change.
I have a mechanical keyboard. I bought a nice one, but I don't know what brand it is.
We need to move on then, because I'm just going to get increasingly more frustrated.
Okay, so it's well documented on this podcast, and I'll put a link in the show notes, that I love Nike shoes. I'm completely and utterly brand loyal to them. This is not at all about anything other than I have a really romantic story in my past of why I love Nike shoes, and I haven't ever been able to overcome it. And to this day, I almost exclusively buy Nike shoes.
I actually also have a brand loyalty to shoes. I am brand loyal to Brooks running shoes. Ben, I'll tell you, my entire life growing up, I didn't care. Shoes were just the things that you wore on your feet to make sure you didn't get tetanus from walking barefoot to places.
That's the way I just described computer peripherals.
Okay, well, I changed that opinion when I started running a lot, and I realized that these shoes are hurting my feet, which are causing knee problems, which are causing back problems. Like, there's the way that our feet strike the ground. Like, we're not built to run. If we were built to run, we would have hooves like horses and knees the size of softballs. We don't. We were built to climb, so we need to augment that with technology. And so I went to one of those fancy running stores where they made me take my shoes off and run barefoot on a treadmill for like 10 minutes, and they filmed it, and they looked at my feet and my stride and how I was like placing my foot and how I was lifting off, and they're like, we have the perfect thing for you. And they gave me this set of Brooks running shoes, and I put them on, and before, shoes were things that I strapped to my foot. Okay, I went to a military academy. I wore combat boots every day. Combat boots are notorious because when you're breaking them in, you're meeting them halfway. Your foot has to get tougher in order to wear the combat boot. That's just how life goes. But these shoes, Ben, I put them on, and it was like a warm hug going onto my foot. And like ever since that, like running was just better. To this day, my daily driver shoes that I wear just out and about are the pair of running shoes that I have retired from running. Like I have a pair of shoes that I only wear when I run, and when they get worn out, they get downgraded to my daily drivers, and my daily drivers get downgraded to work-only shoes, and then the work-only shoes get thrown in the trash. And that's just the progression of shoes in my life.
Wow. That little vignette was beautiful. And I want to say, if there's anyone listening that's a marketer, that is how you market to somebody like Josh. Take some time, convince him that there's science behind what you're doing, and that it meets his specific needs. And then whatever they handed you next, it didn't matter what it was. You were primed to be loyal to that thing.
Brooks, go ahead and sponsor us if you feel like
it. Okay. You and I both put one thing on our list the same on both of our lists, and I was fascinated by this, and it is Samsung, which is a Korean technology company that didn't even exist when we were kids, but I love Samsung. Like, I don't think I've ever had a Samsung product that I didn't like, and it goes back to, I think, my first flat panel monitor that I still have.
The first flat panel monitor that I have is a Samsung. My parents bought it for me in 2001 when it was, I think, $800 or something. and it's sitting right over there in the corner. It's not plugged in because it weighs like 80 pounds and is a monstrosity, but it still works just fine. I made this joke consistently at my house in Clovis that I had so many Samsung products, I was afraid they were all going to hive mind and like become some kind of sentient AI in my house. But I have only ever been disappointed with one Samsung product, and that wasn't Samsung's fault. I see it, and I tell people Samsung is just the Korean GE. They just make all the things, and they're usually good.
Yeah, that's how I feel about it too. And I've yet to experience one that's an outlier. Like, oh, they put the brand on this, but it's not that good. So in my mind, that brand equates to good, high quality, high tech products.
So the one thing that I was disappointed with was I had a Samsung refrigerator that was in this house when I moved into it. Okay. And
I have a Samsung refrigerator in this house that was in when I moved in.
This Samsung refrigerator was great, but the people that owned this house before me were, I don't know. I think they were werewolves, because there are things in this house that are just drive me nuts. Like, for a perfect example.
Why are these claw marks in the drywall?
Ben, I am not joking when I say there are pieces of the veneer on the cabinets that are missing. How do you screw up your cabinet? Whatever. I was replacing my microwave earlier this week because our old one broke. And when I opened up the top cabinets to get to the mounting hardware, there was 5 holes drilled into each side. The guy couldn't find how to mount his microwave. Like, dude, take 10 seconds and a tape measure.
Trial and error.
Yeah, he was just like, nope, not there. Nope, not there. Like, Anyway, so they had a Samsung refrigerator, and they must have treated it like garbage, because we lived here for 6 months and it went out. And I had some guys.
So you had to replace it, but you don't blame Samsung.
Well, here's the thing. I don't blame Samsung. And honestly, Samsung kind of did me a favor on this one, because it was a hugely expensive refrigerator, and the home warranty that I had covered the entire replacement cost. Like, wonderful. I got a real kick butt refrigerator because it was so expensive.
Okay, so I'm detecting some themes underlying this. That our brand loyalty isn't always based on the same kind of thing. Sometimes it's a romantic story from our past. Sometimes it's an experience with a trial product, or something that convinced us logically or emotionally that this is a reason, something we might want to be loyal to. So I'm looking at the rest of my examples. I'm trying to think if there are any that don't fall in that group.
Okay, so my brand loyalty is built on opportunity cost. This is the same reason that if I go to a restaurant, I tend to order exactly the same thing that I got at that restaurant the last time, because I have low expectations for the universe. That's how I keep myself sane, is I expect the universe to screw me at every turn. And then when I go out on a limb and I purchase a new thing, or I experience a new product, and it exceeds all of my expectations, it's like, I know that Samsung is going to deliver me a product that meets all of my needs in a satisfactory way. Why would I risk being disappointed by any other brand?
Okay, that's a good enough reason, I think.
Okay.
So one I feel kind of like that about is back in 2005 when you introduced me to Magic the Gathering. I'd played it once before as a kid, but I hadn't gotten into it at the time. But it kind of filled a hole that I knew existed, and I just deliberately not filled up to that point, and that was of a competitive outlet of a strategy game. And then once I started playing it, I realized there were other things in the same mold. There were other collectible trading card games out there. But as I learned more and more about the company Wizards of the Coast that produces Magic the Gathering, I realized these guys were the best. Like, this is the best collectible trading card game out there. They put the most effort into it, the most research and development. They produce the best looking game, the best playing game, the best players play it. And why would I go anywhere else?
Honestly, I feel exactly the same way. My son was very interested in the Pokemon card game. So a couple years ago, we got like the starter kit where you get 2 decks. And then we played Pokemon, and he had a good time, and it was fun. It's like, oh, this is interesting. So I did a little research, and I realized that exactly what you're talking about. The company behind the game doesn't take it nearly as seriously as Wizards of the Coast does. And as a result, the Pokemon trading card game is an inferior game to Magic the Gathering quantifiably.
Yeah. So let's get into some food ones. How about beverages? I'll let you go first.
I am currently, I've gone through all of my beer. Sorry, listeners. But I have 2 beverage preferences if we want to go into that. But the thing that I'm currently drinking right now is my go-to. it is Dr. Pepper. And I will maintain this. When Prometheus went to Mount Olympus to steal fire for mankind, he brought back Dr. Pepper with him. Like, this is...
When I go out to eat with you, if you like go to the bathroom and the waitress comes to take our order, our drink order, I know very safely what I can order for you.
I have been to All right, so I will tell a side story. My wife wanted to go to, I think it was Pita Jungle or one of those frou-frou, like, oh, this is healthy kind of places, right?
Yeah.
And I went, like, I ordered whatever garbage they had and they scooped it onto my plate. And I went to the soda fountain. And there was an employee standing there. I don't know why. To this day, there was an employee standing there like a concierge of the soda fountain. And I was looking at their options, and I was like, do you have Dr. Pepper? And she goes, no, but we have Diet Dr. Pepper. Ben, it was an effort of will not to slam my tray onto the floor at that minute and burn the place to the ground.
Walk out.
Yeah, it's like, this is... And I've told my wife, I will never go back to that restaurant ever again. Like, how dare you have Diet Dr. Pepper and not actual Dr. Pepper?
Okay, I want to know something. What is your position on the veritable plethora of Dr. Pepper lookalikes? There's dozens of
Dr.
them.
Thunder.
Dr. Choice, Dr.
Yes,
Bolo,
yes.
Dr. Project, Dr. Bob, Dr. Wright, Dr. Skipper.
This is why Dr. Pepper is a brand loyalty, not a soda preference. If it was a preference,
Okay.
I would get Dr. Thunder. It's a brand loyalty because I will actively destroy cans of Dr. Thunder that I see in the wild.
Okay, so you're drinking that Dr. Pepper because you finished something else. What was the other thing you finished?
Oh, so the other thing, this is my go-to default beer of choice. It is Blue Moon. Aha. And what's funny about Blue Moon is that it is actually owned by the Coors Company. But just like in exactly the same way that Chipotle is owned by McDonald's and McDonald's does not advertise that, Blue Moon is owned by Coors and they do not advertise that because they brand Blue Moon as like, oh, this is a high-tier, crafty type beer. This is totally not that watered-down swill that you think Coors Light is. I'm sure. I mean, it is. It's more robust and it's got more flavor and it's a little denser than a Coors Light is. But they don't want to be associated with like the big three, like Coors Light, Bud Light, and like Pabst Blue Ribbon. Like those, you think of those. Anybody that drinks beer, that's like the bottom shelf beer. That's like the house beer. And then Blue Moon, they try to market as like the next shelf up. Like it's still affordable, but it's higher quality stuff.
But they're hiding the fact that it's made by the same guys.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. You know, you mentioned that you don't have a category preference. Like, you don't like Dr. Pepper kind of things. You like Dr. Pepper. And I realize I'm more of the category kind of guy. Like, I like root beers. There's some I prefer over others, but I don't have a particular root beer I like the best. I like ginger beer. There's some I like better than others, but I'll take any ginger beer.
All right. So you're wrong for root beer because A&W is like, gun to my head. Do you have Dr. Pepper? No. Do you have sweet tea? No. Just bring me water. But if I'm feeling saucy and I absolutely have to have something sweet, do you have root beer? Yes. Is it A&W? No. Bring me water. A&W is the only acceptable root beer.
Okay. Does your palate discern between fountain A&W, like bottled A&W, as opposed to tap A&W?
Okay. So this, dude, you are going down a rabbit hole that you have no idea how deep this goes. Because when we're talking about canned drinks, these are the brands that I'm talking about. You go to like a soda fountain, dude, it's all bets are off.
No, I'm not talking to soda fountain. If you go to an A&W restaurant and they have like a separate tap that's coming out of like a keg, that is the number one best root beer out there.
It depends on the place, man. Like if it's an actual like
it's not just syrup being mixed with carbonated water. It's like
that's what I'm all right. So if it's an actual keg of actual root beer, yes, that seems like that's like the source, right? That's drinking straight from the spring that this stuff comes from. But you're talking about like the syrup mixed with water. That's every place is different, and I have found places in the past where I'm like, oh, at this place you've got to get the Dr. Pepper because the way they mix it is just a little bit off, and it's so good.
Okay, we've got just a minute left, and I want to transition out of things that we are brand loyal to you brought this up, and I think it's a brilliant idea, things we're brand disloyal to.
So this came up when you told me earlier this week, hey, we're going to talk about brand loyalty. And I thought, you know what? As I was trying to like brainstorm things that I'm loyal to, there are way more things that I actively hate than there is the things that I am loyal to.
All right, so what's top on your list of things you actively hate?
Oh, it's got to be Tesla. Like right now, it's just in the zeitgeist. I hate every decision that Tesla is making about their cars. Like, oh.
Now, you also mentioned that is that why you call Elon Musk an evil genius?
All right, so here's the thing. Tesla is the Apple of cars. It's like, oh, we are a luxury brand for no other reason than we say so. And you're going to pay more for everything that we have to offer for no other reason than we say so. And we build in all of these things into our stuff, but you got to pay for it.
That offends you.
Just
deeply.
Every part of it. It's just because we say we're better than everyone, we're going to charge you more. And people eat that crap up and live like a social status. It goes, I said, they're the Apple of cars. Let's add Apple to my brand anti-loyalty list because they do exactly the same thing. Every Samsung phone that has ever existed on the side-by-side with the iPhone 13, you can point like apples to apples comparison to the Samsung flagship that is going to be cheaper with a more open ecosystem that works with more of your apps that is going to be just better for you all the way around, but it's Apple, so it's better.
Yeah, this is a much more robust category for you. This brings out your inner cynic. Okay, so I got to tell you my number one, and I want to give an anecdote from a movie. Have you seen the film Sideways?
I have.
It was with Paul Giamatti and Thomas Hayden Church, and they're just kind of like,
yes.
One of them's getting ready to get married, and they go out and just have like a wine drinking party in Napa Valley.
I have seen Sideways, and it is genius in many ways. What is your?
So the part from that is when they're like, oh, let's go to this one restaurant, and then somebody suggests that they drink a Merlot.
Oh, and he flies off the handle.
He flies off the freaking handle.
Yes, I'm not drinking any Merlot. And if anybody orders any Merlot, I'm out of there.
Yeah. That is how I feel about Applebee's.
So Applebee's has like one or two things on the menu that are acceptable, but everything else, it just feels like such a hodgepodge. It's like, guys, pick a lane. You're bad at everything. Why don't you focus and try to get good at one or two things?
Yeah, no, I'm not. I went to Applebee's maybe the 4 times in a row where every time I went, I tried something different and it was horrible. And I kept going, why do I come back here? And sometimes I realized it was because they're just in this weird spot that nobody else is filling, where they're kind of like the hometown restaurant, and they put up posters of like your high school mascot on their wall, and they partner with your school so that they have an Applebee's night where you have to go in and then you eat there and they donate money to the school, and they're just getting me back in there, and I was eating horrible food and hating it, and I finally put my foot down, and now I get like Paul Giamatti in Sideways when my kids say let's go to Applebee's.
You are wrong. Like your opinions are bad and you should feel bad. Like, there's no more Applebee's.
I am not eating freaking Applebee's.
Man, I am on board with that. Boycott Applebee's.
They will not get any more of my dollars.
Applebee's, sponsor the podcast.
All right, I got one more.
Okay.
Have you had any bad experiences with airlines?
I mean, I expect to have a bad experience with all airlines.
Okay, I get it. This is a good emotional defense technique, you say. Like, I'm going to have a bad experience. It could be one airline. It could be another. I'm not going to blame them. It could be the security guys. But I tried like the lowest of the low budget airlines, the like Frontier Airlines, Ryanair kind of tier, where they give you a really low rate and charge you for everything.
Okay.
And my experiences with those have been just so utterly bad. I refuse to be seduced by the psychology of the fake low airfare, and I'm just willing to pay for the medium tier or high tier so that I don't have to deal with all of that garbage.
Well, let's be clear. Medium tier is like normal commercial airlines. If you're saying high tier, I'm thinking private jet chartering. If you haven't done that.
So everybody else is medium.
Yeah, we're just in the medium category.
Yeah, so Ryanair and Applebee's I will never darken their doorstep ever again.
Ryanair, Applebee's, sponsorship opportunities. Give us a call.
Okay, I think that about covers it. There's some things I'm loyal to, some things I'm disloyal to, too. There's the psychology and the ideas behind it, that how we got where we were.
We should do a bonus.
Let's hear yours, audience.
We should do a total bonus episode just talking about Anti-loyalties. I want to rant for an hour about all the things that I hate.
Okay. That will be our next Patreon exclusive episode. We have 3 so far, I think, that if you go and sponsor us on Patreon at patreon.com/badatmagic, you can go and listen to our exclusive content that's available there. And I think we could add an exclusive episode for this.
Excellent. What are some other ways you can support the podcast, Ben?
If you're interested in seeing some of the things we talked about and joining in on the discussion, you can go to our Facebook page, which is where I put a photo album up every time we make an episode, where I include things like you'll see a picture of me looking hopelessly down at a 4,287 Legos shattered on the floor of my living room. If you want to see that, go to our Facebook page. If you want to join in on the discussion in an anonymous kind of way, you can go to our subreddit, and that's where every couple of weeks when we release a new episode, you can go and join in on the discussion there. Or, as always, you can go to our website at badatmagic.live and download episodes and see content there as well.
If you like what we talk about, consider sharing us with a friend. If you like us, maybe your friends will like us too. If you really want to help us out and just want to give back, consider taking your phone out of your pocket right now and giving us a good review on the podcast player of your choice. It is crazy the amount of visibility we get on that stuff. If you want to hear stories about Ben dropping things randomly throughout his house for the rest of time and want to make sure that we just keep doing this forever, consider becoming a patron on our Patreon. And as Ben mentioned, we do have random free stuff that we give away from time to time, and we have exclusive episodes for those patrons.
And until next time, try to be a little less bad at magic.